should be, we're on YouTube, Twitter, and the remaining is Facebook. Ali Hashem is not there. Okay, he's back. He's back. Okay. Pavel?
Yes.
How come Facebook is not yet showing up?
Is it? Just a second.
Okay. So I'll start with this question to Ali to tell us what's the most recent, what happened today, and then after that we'll move to Trita. Tell us about how do you read the American, what does America expect or want out of the negotiation? And we are already online. Okay, so
shall I start?
Please wait.
Just a second.
Mail,
Yes.
please wait.
Okay, so he's
Just a second. Please
okay.
wait.
I have to wait for a second, and then after that we'll ask for Mohamed to comment about the limitations there on both sides. We have on part 2 tomorrow. We have Mohamed Balut from Paris. Will be talking about the Israel view of the negotiations and what do they want out of it. And then on Sunday, Hussein Ayub will be talking about what's ramifications of the negotiations on the Arab world.
Sorry, Neil.
Yes, Pavel.
You should add description on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Okay, done. Okay, great.
And switch to intro music.
To interim.
On numbers.
Am I on air? We are on the air now? مساء الخير يا جماعة، أنا نايل شافعي بحييكم النهاردة في لقاء ندوة عن مباحثات فيينا النووية اللي بدأت يوم الأربعاء الماضي وانتهت اليوم أو علقت اليوم على أمل أن تستأنف الأسبوع القادم. معنا اليوم في أولى حلقات السلسلة هنا من الحلقات معنا علي هاشم، رئيس محطة مراسل الجزيرة ورئيس محطة الجزيرة انجليش في طهران، ومعنا تريتا بارسي، أستاذ العلوم السياسية وهو عضو مشارك كمان في معهد كوينسي في واشنطن دي سي، ومعنا محمد الفتيح معلق سياسي بار اكسلانس وخبير تسليح برضو بار اكسلانس، وانا سعيد بذلك. نحن we're speaking in Arabic, but just Trita, we have to translate for you here. We have Ali Hashem from Al Jazeera English, Trita Parsi from Quincy Institute, and also he is the head of the Iranian American Council. And we have Mohamed AlFtayeh.
Not anymore.
Oh, not anymore? Okay.
Not anymore. It's been 3 years I've been the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute.
Oh,
The think tank in DC.
okay. That's
But I do follow this.
okay. Okay. I appreciate that. And we have Mohamed AlFtayeh from England. Just he's an armament expert who publishes extensively on that. Without further ado, we would like to go ahead and just we talk about the situation, the negotiations happening between the U.S., between Iran and the rest of the world, led by the United States, is quite a difficult one, and we would like to see what happened here. I would like to start just for 1 minute here by just a video from 2015 made by the late friend Mustafa El-Labad, who was talking back then about the negotiations in Vienna.
الحقيقة أنه إيران تريد الانفتاح على الغرب، وهذا هو الدافع الأساسي لإبرام الاتفاق النووي، لأنه الاتفاق النووي على السطح مسائل تقنية، لكنه في العمق انفتاح على الغرب اقتصادي وسياسي. لكن إيران تريد أن تظهر أنها ليست في لهفة وليست في عجلة من أمرها، والدليل على ذلك أنه كان هناك مفاوضات بين إيران والترويكا الأوروبية عام 2003 حتى قبل مفاوضات 5+1، وإيران كانت راغبة في ذلك، وكان وقتها الرئيس الإيراني حسن روحاني يعني هو مسؤول ملف التفاوض، وكانت إيران راغبة بشدة في ذلك. أعتقد أن إيران ما زالت راغبة بشدة، لأن العقوبات الاقتصادية تركت آثارا سلبية كبيرة على مستوى معيشة الإيرانيين وعلى تنوع الاقتصاد الإيراني. لكن إيران تريد أن تقول يعني لقد ارتكبتم كذا وكذا في السابق، يعني تريد إعادة العلاقات، لكن ربما من موقع اليد العليا.
يعني النقطة التي تتفق بها
يعني
مع
إيران
دكتور
تتمنع وهي راغبة.
نعم.
Okay. نحن الله يرحمه. He was a good friend. He was right on the money. His assessment of the situation and negotiations between Iran and the US back then, and I think it's still valid up until now from the Iranian point of view. But this is my own view. I would like to hear about your views, of course. Ali, can you tell us, please, where do we stand now? What happened today?
In English or Arabic?
In Arabic and a little bit of English.
Okay.
And we will translate Trita if you need any.
Let's do it. Yeah. Let's start in English.
Okay.
Anyways, today was the final day of the 7th round, and all the delegations went back to the capitals for consultations. The Europeans and the Chinese and Russians, for sure, they all will have the Iranian proposal to study with their governments. Now it seems there is a bit of dismay. There is a kind of reluctancy to welcome the Iranian proposal, saying that it's changing everything. Because what I understood is that the new proposals, the two proposals, it's true they were built upon what was agreed on in the past 6 rounds of talks. However, there were points that were agreed on that these proposals omitted, and there were points that were disregarded as per the Iranian delegation that were added. So maybe this is why the Europeans aren't welcoming the new proposals, and they think that, at least as we heard from some of them, things are going back to square one. So now, is it true that the things are going back to square one? What I think, at least from observations, is that all parties came to Vienna this week to test the waters. They want to know what's everyone offering, what's on the table. And after that, things might become much and more serious with respect to talks, negotiations, pragmatism, whatever, because you're gonna lower. So this is what now the Iranians are back and are right now maybe heading to Tehran. The Europeans, Russians and Chinese, they're all on their way back. Probably on Wednesday, they'll all be in Vienna.
علي, can you علي صوتك شوية please, make your volume louder. Okay, I appreciate that. What do you think? Thanks, Ali. Trita, where do we stand now from the point of view of the United States? What does the United States expect out of that whole negotiation, and what can they reach?
Well, from the most the American side as a result of this round would not be a very promising one. But what would have been really problematic is if they did not schedule another session. The fact also that they scheduled the next session so soon, just next week, is also very interesting. At the end of the day, as much as there are legitimate complaints that the Iranians are not feeling the same sense of urgency or not pretending to feel the same sense of urgency, nevertheless, the next round was scheduled very soon thereafter. And that's also positive. But as Ali said, the next rounds will be where we will see more clearly as to whether on the substance of issues, there's still too much gap between the two sides. The American side, I think, wants to go back into the deal, but wants to do so with a minimum amount of political cost to the US, while maximizing the amount of sanctions they can keep because of a desire to negotiate a stronger, longer deal, even though if they're not using that terminology so much any longer, but they want to make sure that there are follow-on negotiations rather soon after there is a full return to the JCPOA. And for that, I think they want to keep some of these sanctions. I think there's a concern on the Iranian side that the US side will have to find a way to address. And that is the fact that because it's so clear that the next American Republican president will pull out of this deal, this creates a major problem. What is the value of the sanctions relief if it's only temporary? It's actually quite destabilizing for the Iranian economy to have sanctions imposed and lifted, it's almost better for them to be in a relatively bad but stable position than in and out of the deal over and over again. And I think there's a deeper problem here that the US side has, which is this degree of instability and divisiveness in American politics has led to a scenario in which the United States is no longer capable to keep its agreements in the manner that it could before. Is valuable if the other side is convinced that it actually will lead to a better and that the situation will be stable. But if the US cannot keep its word, understandably, the value of that carrot in the negotiation is losing value very fast. It would be the equivalent if the JCPOA was struck not with Iran, but with the Rouhani government. That would mean that all of the promises, etc., would be much more questionable for the US side. And in fact, the US side did make sure that they protected themselves from that. They installed the snapback mechanism in the Security Council to make sure that if a future Iranian government wanted to cheat or withdraw, it would immediately be punished. There are no such mechanisms on the other side if the US pulls out, and history has now taught us it is actually the US side that is more likely to pull out.
That's very important. I really appreciate it. So what do you think, Mohamed AlFtayeh, about that?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised by that the negotiations have been suspended on the first week, or that it's going to be resumed next week. I think Iran is in a much better position than it was at the beginning of this year. That's why they are not really in a hurry to give concessions during the negotiations, but also their nuclear program now has reached a critical stage. I mean, the most recent report from the IAEA from, I think, the 70th of November, they reported that now Iran has 3 cascades of the most advanced centrifuge, the IR6. So now they have almost close to 500 centrifuges. And the most recent addition has been at Fordo. And you know how Fordo is a more sensitive enrichment plant than Natanz. So they have now 2 cascades at Natanz and 1 cascade at Fordo. Fordo now has almost in total about 1,000 centrifuges. So Iran knows that its nuclear program has reached a very critical stage, and it knows that the United States and the Europeans in particular, they won't take very long pause during the negotiations. That's why they are resuming next week. But I still think that Iran is not about to give significant concessions, because if you look at it now, they know the United States is not really about to resort to a military option. They know that Israel also is not ready to go for that military option. As for Iran, if you look at the economic situation, Iran during this year has been smuggling about 1 million barrel of oil per day. At the beginning of 2021, the oil price was like $50. Now it's close to 80. By the end of the first quarter next year, it will be maybe close to 100. So now I think they have doubled their revenues from smuggled oil. So economically, financially, they are not under pressure like they used to be when Biden won the elections last year. So they are not really close to give concessions that they were not thinking about last year. So I think the negotiations are going to take long time, but I still doubt that there will be a breakthrough anytime soon. From the American perspective, during the Obama administration, the title of this discussion is what's differed between 2015 and now. In 2015, the Obama administration was willing to give certain compromises. They will have reached a stage. They will have normalized their that. And at the same time, if you look at the American media, what American think tanks are saying, no one is saying what they used to say in 2015, that the Iranian regime is misunderstood and if we give them a chance, they will change. No one is saying that. So on one hand, that American optimism in 2015 has disappeared. At the same time, the Iran nuclear program has evolved to a critical stage. So on one hand, the negotiations will continue. I have no doubt about that. But will there be a breakthrough anytime soon, within maybe next 3 months or 6 months? I really doubt it. It's the technical details are becoming very serious now in comparison with before.
So Mohammed is, as usual, he's pessimistic about reaching an agreement. I don't know about Ali and Trita. Especially, I would like to bring up to you the issue as well. It's not just the nuclear weapons or the nuclear program, but in addition to that as well, the drones, the ballistic missiles. Those two technologies, in my view, they are far more even important than the nuclear weapons. How would they play in that negotiation? Will Iran agree to tie them up into the deal? Question. Maybe I should go to Trita first.
No, absolutely not. I don't see any likelihood Iran will agree to that. And the reason for it is that at the end of the day, Iran the Israelis and others all have much more advanced weaponry than the Iranians do. And as a result, if the Iranians agree to completely close down any path to a nuclear weapon, and then the next step is to make sure that also their conventional weapons are being negotiated down while no one else in the region is reducing their weaponry. Just today, the French signed $18 billion of weapons to the UAE. So if the West is continuing to pour weapons into some of the other countries in the Middle East, we should have zero expectations that the Iranians are going to negotiate away what remains of their defenses.
Ali, what do you think?
Yes, Nail. Actually, there is a main issue that Iran is always misread, or let me say it in a different way. The Americans think of Iran in a different way. They see an imagined Iran. They don't see the real Iran. And if you go back in history, at least let's say the recent history, the temporary history, the Iran-Contra scandal, it was based on what? It was based on a thought that the radical Khomeini is going to die, and we're gonna normalize with the other guys that are coming, and things will be better. Reagan said this in his book. It was necessary because we knew that we have to invest. It's the same idea about Obama. We know that we need to invest, but they think that Iran will change. But which Iran is going to change? The issue is that things are different from the Iranian point of view, from the Iranian mentality, at least the system that's ruling right now. And from the beginning, when they went to this engagement, yes, someone was thinking that we will finish the nuclear talks and then go to the missiles program. But the Iranians won't give up, as Trita said. They won't give up their missiles program. the Iran-Iraq war is still fresh. It's still yesterday. It happened between 1980 and 1988. That's not long time ago. So they remember, they understand. At least I claim that many Iranians in the country, aside from their support to the regime or whether they object the regime or they are against the regime or want to uproot this regime, I think they want to be strong in a way or another. And this is what others are not really understanding. The other issue is that if Iran is going to, with respect to the urgency of doing a deal, right now, why should Iran go for a deal? Why should it really go for a deal? The Iranian nuclear program is advancing, and we don't know. We don't know where is the Iranian program right now. And every day there is something new. Every day there is a new surprise. And if you want my point of view on this, I think the Iranians exaggerate. Series of
okay, maintaining the tradition here of using names of Republican presidents of the United States. I would go now and refer to our Nabob of negativity, or just Mohamed AlFtayeh, who would go and just tell us, what do you think of what they are saying, both Ali and Trita, and tell us about that regional solution, or what they call Safartas solution for Safartas.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree that on one hand, it's impossible for Iran to accept to give away or to stop developing its ballistic missiles or to stop developing its UAVs. I mean, if you look at the other case that has some parallel with Iran, the case of North Korea. Now, the only thing that's prevented, I mean, from the North Korean perspective, the only thing that's prevented a large-scale military attack on them is not their nuclear weapons, it's not their they have close to 12,000. Since the 1990s, that was the difference. If there is even special that's for
okay.
I mean, but still, the nuclear heads for the North Koreans won't build up their deterrence against the United States.
Okay.
What will build up their deterrence is their artillery, is their rockets on the borders with South Korea. So for Iran, their deterrence is achieved through their UAVs and through their missiles and rockets. There's no way for them to give that up. And the funny thing is that, or the irony is that, many people in the United States, including people in the Pentagon, whether current generals now or former ones, like one of the generals that talked openly about this is Tony Abizaid, the former CENTCOM commander. He said that it's possible to accept Iran as a nuclear power. I mean, it's possible for the United States to accept that. I think he wrote that in 2008. He said that if we accept that Iran has even nuclear heads, that actually will force Iran to normalize its situation in the Middle East, because they will realize that the nuclear weapons will not actually achieve their economic prosperity or won't develop their position. The only thing that will develop their position is actually if they normalize their position. Okay. So some people in the United States think that we can accept nuclear Iran, but we can't accept Iran to continue building up its ballistic missiles and UAV program. So the Americans know that this thing is more sensitive, the ballistic missiles and rockets and UAVs, and the Iranians know that this program is actually their own card of deterrence at the moment, and maybe for the next 2 decades. Before, I mean, if they started building nuclear weapons now, it will take them at least 2 decades or 3 decades before they have a large enough arsenal on one hand, and to have the delivery systems that they can use to deter the European countries and the United States. So there is no way around this one. This is another technical issue that can't be solved easily. The Americans know that this part of the the Iranian program is very critical at this moment, and the Iranians know that it is their deterrence at this moment. So are they going to give it away, to look away, and the Americans, are they going to look away about this point? I don't think so. I mean, they tried that in 2015. Before reaching the nuclear deal in 2015, there were many resolutions from the United Nations Security Council that imposed sanctions on Iran for developing their ballistic missiles. But when they reached the nuclear deal, the new resolution from the United Nations Security Council 1973, it canceled all these previous resolutions and only said, we call upon Iran not to develop ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear.
So you mentioned about 1,500 penalties or just sanctions, items of sanctions.
This is another thing. Yes, this is another thing. This is the Trump administration, what they have done. You know, there are sanctions that are relevant to the Iran nuclear program that were in place before the nuclear deal in 2015. So Trump administration, they reimposed these sanctions. So they resorted to their own vision of the snapback mechanism. But in addition to that, they have imposed something like 1,500 new sanctions on Iran. But these new sanctions are not imposed because of the nuclear program. They imposed these sanctions for many reasons, such as they imposed sanctions on Iranian Central Bank in September 2019 because of its role in supporting the IRGC, in supporting an organization that's classified as a terrorist organization by the United States. So now, even if they, let's say today or tomorrow, Saturday, Iran and the United States agree to return to the previous nuclear deal, there will be hundreds of sanctions imposed by the Trump administration that there is no way around them.
How easy is that, Trita,
the most serious ones,
for the U.S. to get back to undo those sanctions?
Is that a question for me?
Yes. Sorry, Mohammed, but just we're trying here to. Yeah.
Is going to expand on nuclear basis, at least ostensibly, but on human rights or terrorism basis. Now, the administration itself knows that the Trump administration did those sanctions only to make sure that the JCPOA would be killed and not revived. So many of these people who are in the Biden administration back then made the argument that these were designed to kill the deal. And as a result, the Iranians are making the argument, well, then in that case, there are nuclear sanctions, regardless of what the official justification is, and they should be lifted. And the administration can lift those, but it will face some difficulties in Congress and elsewhere in Washington. But it comes down to the question, do you rather deal with that headache, or do you rather deal with a headache of having a nuclear program in Iran, and potential drift towards a military confrontation?
But
I'm a bit perplexed right now because there seems to be a hesitation on the American side of paying the political cost for making the painful compromises necessary to get the deal, as if those costs are higher than the cost of seeing a failure of the JCPOA, a collapse of the JCPOA, and a potential drift towards.
Will the Congress allow such lifting of those sanctions?
Yeah, the Congress has no. There's elements in which you can say that if something is done that is different from the JCPOA itself, it could activate INARA and bring about a congressional fight. But my understanding is that the administration expects that to happen regardless. And as a result, they're going to have to go to Congress with these measures. The Obama administration was going to be very very tough fight. And they did end up spending a tremendous amount of political capital on this. There's no way you can be the United States, expect that will be done without paying a very high political cost.
Well, I really appreciate it, really. Trita, Mohammed, and Ali. Ali seems that he ran away, but just nevertheless, I really appreciate it. We have reached the end of the time planned, and I can't tell you how much I'm appreciative of your presence and your opinions. And we look forward here to have another meeting, hopefully in the next, as the events evolve.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. And
You're most welcome, my friend.
okay, we'll take care.
Talk to you soon. Okay?
Bye.